We got a few more people popping in on Zoom, so I think we'll go ahead and get started here and get some of the club news and other stuff out of the way. Do we have any guests in the room at Lone Tree there? No guests? Okay,
Okay.
all righty.
We have a founding member here, though, as a guest,
Yeah,
Judy Dice, Dr. Judy.
I do see on Zoom that one of the guests that I was expecting, John Helfrich. John, if you would unmute yourself and just give us a little bit about what type of photography you do, how you found us, those kind of things.
Sure. Um, I like all kinds of photography, but I mostly landscapes and travel photography, but I enjoy all types of photography, and I'm looking forward to opportunities to broaden my broaden the scope of things that I can shoot. And a group like yours, I think, offers that kind of opportunity. So I'm anxious to see what kind of um, program and topics you cover.
Good. Well, we're glad to have you here, sir. And yeah, our competition this evening is in motion, so you get to see one of our topics for the year. We try to challenge people with competitions during the year with different subjects, different genres, trying to get them to, shoot things that they perhaps don't always shoot. And of course, we've got a series of programs, each month, January through November, where we get some educational opportunities, and we have a lot of those recorded too and available for members. So there are lots of opportunities for you to learn new stuff, and we even have club members that are mentors. So if you need help with particular topics, we can match you up with somebody and get you some additional training. Again, welcome, sir. Glad you're here.
Yeah.
So a little bit of club business before we get going here. This is the time of year that we start asking people to help run the club, to fill the positions for the president and vice president, treasurer, membership, et cetera, et cetera. Currently, some of the people who currently hold those positions have indicated that they will continue to do so in 2024. I myself will stay on as the competitions chair. But we are looking for president, a treasurer, a person to run the membership committee, which is kind of a committee of one, anyways. We call them committees. And we'll also be looking for somebody to run the meetings, something that Bill is doing right now. So if you have any interest in any of those things, please get in touch with me. I'm sure most of you have my email already, or just send it to president@focuscolorado.com. That'll come right to me. But we would like to get those positions filled and committed. Without a few volunteers to run the club, we're not going to have a club. So it's really important that we find people with the desire to help out and to help run the club and keep us going. To all those people who volunteered in 2023, I would at this time like to extend a great thank you to all of you. I know some of you have done the same thing for a couple of years, so we appreciate that very much. It takes a clan to keep it all going. So again, if anybody's interested in any of the positions available for the club to help us keep this ship afloat, just send me an email and let me know.
Everybody jump up at once.
Yeah, it's always a challenge, that's for sure. But I'm thinking that the people who showed up in Lone Tree, that's the pool potentially of people who would be willing to do this kind of stuff. Obviously the people on Zoom also, but especially for Bill's position to come in and open the door and run the computer through the meeting and that kind of stuff. That does take a bit more commitment than normal, but we do need somebody for that. David Besson has said that he would assist with that, but he does travel occasionally, so we need to make sure that we have at least two people to cover that. So our next meeting will be our program in November. That'll be our very own Steve Wilton. Steve, you want to talk a little bit about what you'll be presenting for us? It sounds interesting.
Sure. My presentation is about a 2.5-year personal journey from when I started my photography hobby during the pandemic up to today. There's 2 parts to the presentation. First is the road to finding a niche. It's a methodical, accelerated approach that I use to experimenting with many different genres in order to settle upon one of them. And the second part deals with developing a consistent look or personal style for my photography, specifically the radar I employ to locate unusual photo opportunities. I know that sounds geeky, but I think you'll enjoy the process.
Well, thank you. Now, radar, I'm intrigued, but we'll wait. We'll hold it. Let's hold it and make it suspenseful, and then everybody has to come show up at the program meeting in November to find out. Thanks for that description, Steve. We're looking forward to that. That's we've seen a number of your images through the year, and I'm sure that they're part of your project. And
Oh yeah.
Some of the shots that you showed from when you guys went out and shot in Littleton,
Right.
those were very interesting too. So
Thanks.
we appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so like I said, our competition subject is in motion. So the description was water, kids, a blender, wildlife, planes, trains, automobiles, you name it. There are thousands of things in motion around you every day. Capture an interesting image to effectively portray that motion to the viewer. And for this evening, we have Mark Osler. Mark has been a judge for us a few times in the past years. He's, let me read this quick bio here. Mark has been a photojournalist and picture editor since 1990, working at newspapers between 1990 and 2007, from Oregon to Rhode Island. Currently, he works independently, helping nonprofits increase their financial and volunteer support through better visual storytelling. In addition to his work behind the camera, Mark has also taught photojournalism at colleges, the Art Institute, and in workshop settings. His most recent work documented a donor involvement project this past summer in Kenya for a Canadian nonprofit that builds elementary and secondary schools in rural areas of the lower Rift Valley. Mark shoots primarily with his Canon R5 and 24 to 240 zoom lens. He also works with the Canon R6 and the Nikon D850. For those of you who are tilting your head going, wait, did he say a 24 to 240? Yeah, I had to look that up too. Apparently, the Canon R system does have a 24 to 240. I was kind of surprised to see those numbers, so I had to double check. Mark, is there anything you'd like to add in addition and/or any commentary about how you judge?
Yeah, a few things. First thing, last name Osler. It gets mixed up frequently, so no
I'm
problem
very sorry.
there.
I'm sorry.
Not at all. Not at all. So this is a pretty challenging subject matter, both to shoot and to judge, because everything, for the most part, unless you're shooting still lifes, everything has a motion quality to it. So in my judging, what I am looking for are pictures where that are special simply as a photograph, but also that have motion as a key element of what makes them strong. There are a number of pictures in here that do have visible motion, or they have things that are in motion, and some of the differentiating criteria are going to be how powerful is the motion as a contributing element to the picture. So as I always like to say when I judge, I have been to many contests. I've been to Atlanta Photojournalism, I've been to NPPA, Best of Photojournalism, Pictures of the Year competitions, World Press Photography. And if you bring in different judges, you have a completely different set of winners. So this is one man's opinion. I hope that the primary effect of all this is the ability to learn something from someone who has worked with tremendous photographers over the course of his career and has made many mistakes on his own and is trying to share the benefit of that. So with that, is there any other housekeeping we need to do before we get started?
As we go through the images, I'll announce the titles, and then Mark, you can go ahead and give your thoughts and opinions about the image, give it a score. We'll continue through like that. When we get 6 or 8 or so 9s and 10s, we will pause. I will announce that, of course, and we'll pause and talk to the image makers to get their input and ideas and thoughts about the image itself. So if everybody on Zoom looks like you're all muted, I'm ready to go. Bob or Fred, whoever's, looks like Fred's in the room. Are you to running the show this evening?
It looks that way.
One last thing I'm going to say, I am going to be looking at the pictures as they come up on my personal computer, which is calibrated. I calibrate this about once a month, and I would encourage anybody who is serious about their photography and does printing to invest in a little calibration unit. They're not expensive. Well, I guess it's all relative, but you know, they're under $200 and they make a tremendous difference. One of the things that I noticed was pictures varied quite a bit in between bright and dark, and it's not really fair for me to judge on that criteria because I don't know if everybody is on a calibrated computer. So, you know, you could have a picture that is from a, you know, a universal calibration standpoint too bright, and if you just turn your monitor down, it's going to look great. Same thing vice versa. If you have too dark, you can just brighten up your computer. So, you know, that you know, everybody is able to work off of you know, from a common vantage point. I think it's a terrific investment for any photographer to get a piece of calibration. It's easy to use, and I really endorse them highly.
Right. And on that note, I will say that I would venture to say that probably somewhere between 30 and 50% have of our members already have their own calibration device, and they do you know, they have a calibrated workflow. But we as a club also have a calibration tool, a Color Monkey, available for any of our members. All they have to do is shoot off an email to vice president at focuscolorado.com, and David will work with you to get the unit to you, get the software downloaded, and you can calibrate your system. So that is a member benefit that everybody should be
That's a
aware
good
of.
one.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's start the show. All right, this is titled Calibration. And to speak about exactly what you were talking about here, you know, the reason that we show this image is for people on Zoom, you know, depending on the system that they have, you know, they may see colors just a little bit differently. That the TV that's in the room is off just a little bit. So this gives you a little indication. You know, you can see that if it looks a little less saturated, low contrast, et cetera, know that all the rest of the images you'll be seeing this evening will look similar. You know, so we can't get a perfect screen all the time, but we can get close. Our first image is going to be just dropping in.
So this is a, a nice striking photograph from a color standpoint. Obviously, the person is in motion. It's, in my mind, it's a fairly one-dimensional shot, pretty straightforward. It's, it's got the technical qualities. It's toned well. As far as motion, adding to the impact of this photograph, or the photograph on its own being something special. I wasn't particularly moved by this. I've seen many things like this. So, context, body language, some unusual tilt as he's making a turn. Those are the kinds of things that I think would have elevated this photograph a little more. So I gave this picture a, let's see, a 7.
Follow the leader.
Yeah, this is a beautiful picture. I really like this. This was a picture. I took a number of these pictures when I was at home and just threw them into Photoshop. And, I took these and just used the select subject, inversed it, and then took the background down just a little bit to get them to stand out a little bit more. And I felt it elevated the picture a little bit, but it's beautiful. There's great separation. I like that you've got birds in 2 different wing positions. I mean, who doesn't like pelicans, for heaven's sakes? Great. Really beautifully printed in the tonality from the brights to the darks, tack sharp, tremendous detail all the way through. So, technically, really a beautiful picture. In terms of motion, really elevating this, or it being something where you're just going, wow. I don't think it quite got there. I gave this a 9, but I mean, this is just really a beautiful picture.
Perfect landing.
Okay, so one of the things that I asked Carl about when we talked about judging these was how to view the pictures in terms of shutter speed, right? Because a lot of times you think about motion, you think about having some element of blur, either in the background behind a sharp subject, or the subject itself blurring against a background that's sharp. So, we talked about it, and it was really just, how does motion contribute to the picture? So, this is a really nice sports picture. This could certainly be on a sports or a prep section cover in a newspaper. It's got great expression, hair's flying up. It's printed well. You've got light from behind, so the subject has been lightened up. Might have wanted the legs lightened up just a little more, so there's not so much difference. But and then the background brought down enough. Good choice of low depth of field to get separation. So I thought this was a terrific picture. The feet buried in the sand. In a perfect world, maybe you get the sand up a little bit more, but then the moment has moved forward, and you always lose something. It's that's the picture editor in me, right? Wanting all the perfect things that happen over a span of time to be in one picture. So I thought this is a terrific picture. Motion aside, it's a great picture, and it's got motion in here. So I gave this a 10. And I think the choice of black and white here probably helped this. I imagine the background could have had a number of distracting colors. Just looking at the tie-dye shirt, looks like off to the right there. So good choice there as well.
Elijah on wheels.
So this is there's a lot of nice things about this. Everybody has seen the Cartier-Bresson picture of the fat man jumping over the pond. I don't know if everybody has looked at that picture and noticed the there is a little poster on the fence in the background of a person who is making basically the same body language as the man jumping in the pond. If you haven't seen it, it's an interesting detail. Somebody pointed it out to me, a number of decades back. But you've got this girl on the wall that's painted in there that really adds a fun element. And you've got a semi-busy background, and you have a lot of depth of field in here, and those can be challenging. So the things that are just terrific about this, if you look at the areas of separation of the subject here to the background, the hand is in the sunny area on the wall, right? Separated out. The hand above the highway in the background, right? It's not in the bush, so you've got that separation. His head and face and hair separating against the sky. The foot is not, inching into the girl's face in the background. The skateboard itself, the bottom of the skateboard separates from the pool. All of those things. I mean, those are things that, let's be honest. I mean, a good part of that is luck for all of those things to happen. But I have to imagine that the photographer that took this was conscious about those elements. I'm going to, give the benefit of the doubt there, but it just elevates this picture to have all those qualities in there. And then you've got this beautiful side lighting. So, again, I'm making assumptions here, but I'm assuming the photographer chose this position because of how the light was going to fall on the subject. You go to skate parks, you see people coming up oftentimes in similar parts of the skate park on a wall. And so, you have a lot of choices on how you want to do this. I like the lens selection here. So, you've got the subject that's big and the person in the background is small. I just think everything in this picture just works so nicely. And I gave this a 10. I think that's just a terrific execution on this from so many fronts. And again, I don't know what this would look like. You've got what appears to be late daylight. It could be a nice color picture, but I'm a fan of black and white, and I think this works really beautifully because this is not about the color. This is just about so much of the content. So I think the choice of black and white here was terrific. I know personally, I have a tendency to darken things down in a background so a subject will stand out. And oftentimes it's to the detriment of the picture. And I like leaving the sky a bit lighter in the background so that hair really stands out with contrast. So just great job.
It slithered under the Halloween moon.
Okay, I don't quite know what to do with this picture here. This is an artistic rendering. I may be missing this. I don't understand motion in this. From a technical standpoint, putting the moon in there where it's in front of the trees, it's unusually large. There's technical things about, I just don't understand this, but from what the theme of the contest is, I don't think that this really works at all. So I gave this a 6.
Round and around we go.
So, this is one of those photographs that clearly there is motion going on, but from a standpoint of impact, it's fairly static. The very deep depth of field, I think, in this case, because of what's in the background, works against this picture. You have the lean that's going on, so that does give you it does give you a little bit of dynamic in terms of motion, but I just don't think there's much that would hold you. If this picture came up, if you saw this on a page in a magazine, I don't know that you would stop and really invest time in this. So it just didn't really grab me, and I ended up I gave this an 8.
Is this one where the shutter speed could have played a different role?
Yeah, and I looked at this and I was thinking, what are things that you could have done? Now, a slower shutter speed with them coming straight at you isn't really going to do much. But if you imagine the leaders, right, they're going to come across in front of those riders that are in the back. And if you had used a slower shutter speed and panned with the leader as they came across, you would have that motion, and you would have all of the cyclists behind them that would, their motion would be blurred. And I think that executing this picture that way, shooting it with a longer lens like this is, but just making a different decision on when you're going to shoot this and how you're going to arrange your foreground against your background. I think that would have been something that could have worked and elevated this picture.
Thanks for explaining that, and thanks to whoever asked that question. It's important for when somebody gets a lower score to have some indication.
Yeah.
So what could be improved, or what technique might be used, or something else like that. So thank you.
Yeah, and I don't think we have a huge number of pictures. So if anybody wants to ask questions or discuss the picture, I'm happy to do it.
This is Canine at Work.
Okay, so to me, this is the moment before the motion. So I like the moment. These dogs amaze me to watch these dogs work, and having seen them, I'm sure everybody has seen these dogs at work herding sheep. They're just, to me, there just seems like there must have been many other opportunities to get that sense of motion in here, but this picture itself is fairly static. This is a picture almost of stillness. There's an anticipation of motion, but I don't know that motion really contributes to this. I gave it an 8 because I liked the moment. I liked the concentration of the dog, his paw up like that. But in terms of motion really being a contributing element to this picture, I don't think that that comes across. One of the things I just want to mention too, as you look at pictures, because the person who took this may feel very differently about this, and it's important to remember as a photographer that you also need to sit in an editor's chair, because unless you're doing pictures solely for yourself, the picture has got to communicate your intent to an audience. And if you're shooting this for a contest, the intent here is to get across the idea of motion. So, when you look at things while you're shooting, while you're evaluating and making your decision, it's important to run that question through your head. How is motion elevating this picture? I think that's a really important quality for people who are successful with their photography, is they are, they're shooting with intention, and they are putting on their editor's hat while they're still shooting, so they can be objective about how successful they're being while they still have an opportunity to make additional pictures.
Rollerblading with the dog.
I really like this picture. I think the shutter speed choice is just right. Maybe it could have been one click slower. I'm really nitpicking. I love that you've got, it almost looks like it might have been flashed. I can't tell for sure, but that you've got one rollerblade that's tack sharp, the other one's got motion in it. The dog's legs are blurred, but not so much that you don't know that they're legs, right? That you have vertical elements in the background. Maybe this is elementary, but it's very important when you're panning horizontally that you have vertical elements and you have different colors, different tonalities in the background, so that sense of movement is communicated. If you have similar colors, if you have horizontal lines and you're panning horizontally, you're not going to get a feeling of motion because your camera is going to go horizontal with things that are horizontal. So it's just going to look like horizontal lines. So, the moment here where the bright hat is against the dark background, his leg is up, the position of the dog with his legs up, got great energy. I like the toning, it's, the greens in this picture are pretty rich, but it doesn't distract at all. It doesn't distract me at all in this picture. And I think this is very successful. I'm sitting here putting my hand over the tree on the far left to see if, I kind of like that in there. So I find this very successful. I gave this a 10.
Break.
Okay, so from a technical standpoint, this was one of those pictures that it was either toned too contrasty or the exposure wasn't quite right from the beginning. I'm not sure what it is, but I went in and I toned this picture and I darkened the felt down a little bit more, lightened up the arms and the triangle there just a shade more because that's where the motion is. I think the shutter speed selection for this picture to get this motion was exactly right. It's the toning choices on the picture I think could have been improved. That the shadows on the arm when I tried to lighten it had gone completely to black, so there was really no way to get any separation of the upper arm against the background. It's a fairly simple image. There's no huge wow factor. This is simply trying to get a feeling of motion in a picture, as an element in a larger story. This could be a detail picture that might be interesting. I gave it a 9, which might be a little bit generous here because it's a fairly simple picture, but the motion is what makes this picture work. So from the standpoint of the theme of the contest, I think that has to be recognized. The shutter speed is perfect, I think, in this, to get the proper amount of blur without losing what it is that's going on. I just think this could have been toned a little bit better. So and the other thing that I did when I toned this is I tried to bring that shadow behind the balls out a little bit more. It was it's kind of a fun little compositional surprise in there. So bringing that out a little bit more, in my mind, gave it a little bit more impact. So there you go.
I really don't like bats.
Okay. this, I don't even, this just cracked me up when I saw it. This picture needs to be toned better. I know that, you know, the floor in the background could be darkened down a little bit, so you got a little better separation out of the lower part of the picture. But I don't know if this was pre-imagined by the photographer. You know, they did it once and they were like, oh my gosh, and, you know, tried to do it over and over. But I mean, that's really a pretty amazing image to look at. It just, I mean, it just has a very, it's got the stop quality that you want a picture to have. Very unusual. You know, motion clearly is what makes this work, and that still eye. It just, it's a great picture. I want to give it a 9 because you know, it's not toned as well as it could be, but it's such a great picture. I gave it a 10.
Skimming the surface.
I looked at this before and I didn't notice until just now it looks like the wingtip hit the water there on the right side of the picture, and I didn't notice that before. I think I would have, I think cropping that in from the left side as you're looking at this, so it's closer to the wing, would have forced your eye more to the right, so that you don't miss what really is the point. I'm guessing the point of this picture is the fact that the wing hit the water. That's what elevates this. Is you know, as a photograph, without that, you know, this picture is pretty one-dimensional. It's, you know, it's really demonstrating the capacity of the camera to autofocus. So it's yeah, there's nothing extraordinary about the picture other than that the wing hitting the water, which is kind of unusual. You don't see that an awful lot. So you know, technically it's toned well, it's focused well. You know, I like how the detail under the wing was lightened up the right amount, and I think it's prepared technically well from an impact standpoint. It's not knocking my socks off, but you know, that the little water is what gives it a little bit enough unusualness to get me to enjoy this. So I gave this I gave it a 7, but I'm giving it an 8 now that I've seen that little addition. But I would definitely crop this in almost right up to the wingtip. I would probably crop, you can see that little, I guess it's a leaf in the water. I would actually crop right through the middle of that. So you de-emphasize, you know, like right in the middle, right where it dips, right, like right there. Yeah, right there, right, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And, you know, I think cropping is an art in and of itself that shouldn't be discounted. When you choose what you're going to show your audience, things that are fully encapsulated inside the edges of the frame, your viewer is going to assume that that's deliberate. And if it's there in full, it's going to have more visual weight than something that has a little bit of it cropped out. And that's why I'm making that subtle difference between coming right up to the edge and then cropping it in the middle, because you're going to de-emphasize. It's why portrait photographers who choose to crop into the head of their subject, even if it's just a little, are doing that because it takes you down into the face. It's a deliberate decision. It's, it may be a style thing, but also from a, standpoint of delivering message and impact, you can communicate a lot by how you crop a photograph. And I think you should be just as deliberate about that as you are in the photographs that you're making when you're out in the field.
No turning back now.
So, there's a lot of things that to like about this. It's, you could probably make this picture every single plane that took off on an aircraft carrier, because that's what they do. But that said, you've got everybody who's separated. You've got the person who is telling them to go with the yellow jacket, really stands out against the dark deck. You've got motion in the plane. I think you probably could have stood for a little bit more motion. I don't think you would lose what is going on. You might have brought a little bit more drama into that. From a toning standpoint, I think it would have been pretty easy and could have brought more impact to have brought the sea down just a little bit and maybe a little more contrast into the plane itself, since that's your center of interest. So I gave this a 9. I think that's, it's a bit generous, but it's, again, I'm trying to be conscious of what the intent was here and, the purpose of shooting this. It's motion. It's a storytelling image. You completely get everything that's going on here. So there's a lot of levels. It's successful. Even if it's probably not the most difficult picture to make once you get, but that's probably true of a lot of pictures. If you get yourself in the right place, that's part of making a picture too, is understanding where the best place to shoot this from. So it was a good decision to get at this perspective to execute this picture. So I'm giving it a 9.
This is slow motion.
This, I really like this picture. It's a good storytelling picture. It's a beautifully toned black and white image. And what makes this, from a motion standpoint and from the contest, satisfying is the body language, right? It's not only do you get to see him move, you get a sense that he's a little nervous. Whether he is or not, he probably does this all day long, but I, as a viewer, am getting that experience. The toning on this picture, I think I've already said, is just terrific. I like the deep depth of field on this, because all of that wood in the lower part of the picture, especially the wood going back, the framing going back away from the viewer, all that detail there and the dark and white striping, I think those all are really nice. So I like the moment. I think that the motion carries the picture, and you feel something from this picture, and that's always a defining quality in any really good picture. So this is a 10.
This is Road to Hana, and after this one, we'll stop and take a look at the 9s and 10s and talk to the makers and get their input on it.
This picture, I think, could have been toned better. And I took this picture to Photoshop, and I lightened up some of the dark area on the wall right there, gave it a little bit more contrast, and took some of the foliage in the background down just a little bit. And in my mind, it gave it more impact. It put a little more contrast in the water there just to, give this all a little bit more life. This is a beautiful photograph. Again, it's not a difficult picture to execute, but you have to recognize what this picture can be. What nobody sees. This is one of those pictures where the only way you get to see this is by photographing this. We can't see this. So the photographer has to recognize the potential that exists for this scene to yield this picture. So, I give credit for that. I just think it could have been toned a little bit better. A lot of landscape pictures benefit from having some foreground element, something that leads you into the picture. So from the standpoint of composition, it's somewhat straightforward and doesn't have a lot of dimension, but from an execution standpoint, it's very good. It's a very nice picture. I think it could have been toned a little bit better, so I gave this a 9.
So looking at the 9s and 10s that we've gotten so far. Okay, so the first one we're looking at is Follow the Leader. There we go. This is from Dan Greenberg.
Yeah, this is a picture I took last year in Costa Rica. Its original name was Drops of Water because both of them had just come out of the water. This is, the thing in the background is like an island way off in the distance. They had just come out of the water and you could see the little drops of water falling and stuff like that. And I wasn't sure if that would be a good thing to leave in or not. So I did take them out. Because otherwise I thought some judge will see it and think there's little white spots all over the place. But anyway, and the other thing about this is it was shot with an 840 millimeter lens at f5.6. Wow. And so one of the things, if you've ever tried, I'm not a very good bird photographer for the most part. And so when you're trying to track them, it's real easy to either fall behind or get ahead of them and then kind of, because this isn't cropped that much. I mean, I cropped it so it's a panel, but it's not otherwise cropped that much. And what happened, the front bird flew out of the picture, so I reconstructed the feathers on the front of his wings. Wow. And then, and also added on to the side of the picture and took off from the other side of the picture. And then, the other thing that was interesting on this too is that at 5.6, with that far out, the first bird was a tiny bit out of focus compared to the back bird. Back bird was perfect. And so I ran it through, and it was at ISO 1250, I believe. So I ran it through either Topaz, Sharpen AI or Photo AI, or maybe on one. I have a couple of them. I forgot which one I denoised it with, but anyway, I sharpened that just a little, then didn't sharpen anything else, and so that's basically what it did. And then in color it was okay looking, but I thought it'd be cooler in black and white.
So it's a good image, and black and white was a good choice, I think. Next one is Perfect Landing from Danny Lamb.
The picture was taken in a high school track and field event. And you're absolutely right. Converting the picture to black and white makes the subject stand out more.
Right, yeah, sometimes it's hard to know when to go black and white, but yeah, colors can be distracting, and when you get down to black and white tonality, that can really make an image pop and make your subject pop. So,
right.
Very good choice. Elijah on Wheels is from Cecilia Zapata.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for the comments. My husband seems to choose the best places to take photographs. And so for this one, he took me downtown to downtown Denver. There's a skate park kind of close to Confluence Park. And so there was this gentleman, this young man who was sweating doing tricks out there. And so I actually walked up to him and I asked him if he would do, something for me to capture. And so he did. He went out there and did his thing, and I was able to capture this moment. So, yeah.
That's awesome. And, all the points that Mark made about the hand position and the hair and everything else, that I'm sure you planned it that way. I'm sure that's exactly what you were thinking.
I did. Just kidding. No, he also mentioned it was pure luck. Yes, it was that. Pure luck.
And
But it was just the perfect, just perfect timing. And I did a burst, and I took several pictures. I want to say in total there were probably about 30 pictures of that whole moment. And so this one I found was the best one out of the bunch.
exactly, yep. That's what you got to do sometimes, especially stuff that moves fast like this. Burst mode is a great thing.
Thank you.
Mhm. Our next shot is rollerblading with a dog.
So, I hope you can hear me. So
Yes.
even though this may have been a complete accident, I do hope you paid attention to the things that resonated with me so that you can do this deliberately on future, because it really, I mean, you had 30 pictures to choose from, so I applaud you for choosing this picture because it has so many qualities that work. These are the things that you want to try to do on purpose on future pictures, but I think it's a great picture. I think I never do it again.
Yeah, thank you. And I did look out of all the, the 30 plus shots, I did look for the ones where because the background was so distractive, and I cropped this quite a bit. I almost included this there was a statue to the left of him that was really cool, but I ended up cropping that out. And the color picture, there were so many colors going on in the background that I decided to turn it into the black and white. But I did look specifically to make sure, especially like his hair and his hands, the skateboard, that those were very, that they stood out.
Yeah, all your choices were excellent. The space around him, just all kinds of good decisions.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so rollerblading with the dog. This was Dave Hull. Is Dave in the room there?
Yes, thanks very much. Mark, thanks very much for your comments. This was taken last week at Washington Park, kind of late in the afternoon, and it was busy. I was able to use the clone stamp tool in a lot of places on this image. There was a bicyclist on the right that got eliminated. There were a lot of cars in that dark background behind the trees that were parked.
Nice.
And there was actually, there was a sign, so I was able to kind of get rid of the distractions and kind of focus on this. I have a tendency to oversaturate things. It's just the way I like things to look. So, but appreciate your comments. Thanks.
It's really nice. Yeah.
No, that's a very nice image, Dave, and this epitomizes our subject matter this evening.
Thanks, Carl. What is on your head? Oh, no, it's Fast and Furious.
And break is from Kyle Derlam.
I'll say the same thing, Mark. I really appreciate your comments regarding the tonality and your generosity too. Thanks for going 9 on that. I've spent, you were talking about on another picture, you mentioned how important crop is. This became a pretty tight crop. It's something, this is actually a photo that is 4 years old, and I've been working on it off and on for years because I just could never get it to where I wanted. And finally, I don't know how many times I've cropped it, but anyway, I'm going to listen to the recording when it comes out and revisit your comments specifically on tonality and mess around with it some more now. So thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate it. I really do, honestly.
Sometimes it takes a couple shots at an image to edit it and get it exactly the way you want it. So still, it's very nice. This is I really don't like baths from David Besson. David is not with us this evening. He's traveling with his wife. He's in Boston. Wasn't sure if he's going to be able to make it on the Zoom or not. He said this photo of our dog was taken right after a bath this past summer. Of course, he ran into the house, shaking like mad and spraying everything within 8 feet of him. So I think this was a one-time shot. Mark, you kind of mentioned and wondered if it was done multiple times, but it seems to me like maybe it was a one-shot deal. No turning back now. This is Brian Donovan.
Yeah, I took this 6 or 7 years ago, and I really didn't like it because it was much busier. There was, a wing from another plane in the picture, and maybe a tug and a bunch more people. But once I took all that out, I thought it worked much better. Thanks for your comments.
Like you to lead a focus group on the next aircraft carrier opportunity that you have.
That'd be great.
Well, that would be a heck of an adventure. Yeah. Slow motion is from Steve Wilton.
Yes, this was taken in Arvada at it's a series of photos I took of these construction workers, master carpenters and the like, working on the apartment complex there. This is definitely OSHA compliant. You see the guys, they're all tethered. They were all tethered so that if they did fall, they wouldn't get hurt too badly. And I had shown this before to someone, a friend, and he suggested that I crop out the bottom part of it, but I resisted that suggestion because I think it gave a bit greater sense of height to it. When I took this picture, the guy made me feel really nervous, and apparently I was able to convey that. And thanks for your comments, Mark.
Yeah, this was a really good image, and it does have that emotional impact that, oh my gosh, I'm scared for the guy kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the last that we're looking at here is Road to Hana from Jenna Dockweiler.
Yeah, thank you so much for your comments. I agree. Looking at it now, it does look kind of flat. So I'm going to look at this again in post and see what I can bring out. And then I don't remember, this picture was taken in Hawaii. I don't remember if there was much in the way of foreground. I kind of don't think so because I didn't include any, but I actually don't remember, but I agree it could benefit from some foreground. So thank you so much for your comments.
Well, even, if you don't have foreground, potentially just including more space rather than just, focusing on the part of the picture that's going to be your point of interest. The point of interest doesn't always have to be a large, take up a lot of real estate on the photograph. So, the scene could have been a kind of a framing element to this and just taking it down a little bit and letting this have the bright areas and some contrast. Might have been another solution if there was no foreground. I think it would have probably had a little more impact in that respect as well.
Yeah, that's a great thought as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, when Mark was talking about this, one of the things that hit me is maybe he said he talked about adding contrast on the water, and I'm wondering if even a little dodging and burning would help to bring out some more contrast, and you kind of have some lines in the water pointing in towards the waterfalls. If maybe that would be kind of leading people into the image too. So that was just my thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a nice image. I looked at the metadata. This was a 6-second exposure, I think. Kudos to you that everything else in the background was just sitting still for 6 seconds.
Yeah, it was a really still day, and obviously I was on a tripod.
Right. Very good. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program. And this would be Colors of the Night.
This is to me, this is a picture about light or color. Yes, these things are in motion. I mean, if there was something dramatic about the shape or, the way that the water was being frozen with slow shutter speed, that might have elevated this. But I think this is either begging to be a slow shutter picture or looked at from the standpoint of line geometry and texture to bring out the drama that something in motion creates. If you look at, for example, if you look at the background fountain, the left side of the fountain, and imagine cropping kind of the left third of that picture, right? To the left of the tall spout there, you can see that there's all kinds of lines in there, and you've got bright and dark, and you've got you have the water texture, and you may not have had a lens that could have done that. I'm just trying to bring this out as an idea of how you could execute different types of pictures in settings like this. My favorite exercise to do on my own when I'm just walking around and find something that's interesting is to try to create as many very different pictures from a single subject as I can. You know, it's the visual push-ups that you hear people talk about. And, you know, to me, you make this picture, it's showing you, you know, this is kind of the record shot. And then you start asking yourself, what else? You know, what else can I do? What else is here? Move around, look at things more closely, try to break things down to fundamentals. Look at things very tight, look at things very loose, and see what might be there. Walk around. But that so, you know, I gave this a 7, but I think there are 9 and 10 level pictures in this. This just isn't it.
Hey, Mark, just with that last one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just taking a shot here, but that to me looks like water in 1/40th of a second.
Oh, I bet it's faster than that.
Yeah, 40 is 60 something, but what if it were, you know, 2 seconds?
Yeah, that's it, right. I think that this picture shot this way is, you know, is just asking to be a slow shutter picture. There's a lot of things going on in that fountain in the background. If you just focus on that and you look at the dynamics of how the water is moving, there's a picture there. I don't know what the best picture is, but there are other pictures in there just from the standpoint of the geometry, again, geometry, texture, contrast, those types of things. But yeah, shot like this, yep, 2 seconds, 8 seconds, 30 seconds, you know.
I know the artist, but maybe it's handheld and maybe it really needed a tripod.
Yeah, I will tell you that I do not often travel. Well, I don't walk around even at night with a tripod, and part of it is you know, just I'm just lazy. But you know, I like to challenge myself because I take a lot of slow shutter speed, you know, 2, 3, 4, 8 second pictures with whatever's available, you know, with a tree, with a bridge. You know, I find things that I can stabilize myself on. So yeah, you know, maybe they didn't have a tripod, but there are other solutions to keeping a camera still when you're in the field if you don't have a tripod. And, you know, it can be, you know, fun to try and MacGyver some of these things.
Okay, our next image is Rodeo Queen.
Oh, one last thing I want to say about, can you go back to that last picture? All right, 'cause I think this is a good point. You know, when you think about slow shutter pictures, right, the first thing that comes to mind is I need a tripod, but it does not mean that this picture would not have been interesting if you had handheld this for 8 seconds. I mean, it could have been just, you know, more abstract, but I mean, why not? You know, you're not trying to get anything. There's nothing else in this picture really that needs to be sharp. It is just a study of color right now. So if you just allow the camera to do whatever movement it's going to get, if you try to stand as still as you can, you will still get a sense of what's there, but it could lend to a pretty interesting picture.
Could rotate the camera.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You could rotate, you could move the cameras, all kinds of things you could do. I have a friend of mine, a very good photographer, who goes out to the ocean and will shoot 6 and 8 second pictures and just kind of move around with the waves. And he gets some really amazing pictures. And they're, you know, they are abstract, but they get all their impact from the motion of the subject and the motion of the camera. So, you know, it's a fun thing to do as a photographer, to play a little bit and just see what happens.
Okay, so Rodeo Queen.
Carl, you did tell me you want me to keep these people here to 11, right?
Well, maybe not exactly that late. They're going to kick
All
us
right.
out. They're going to kick us out at 9 o'clock anyway. So we do have that limit.
Okay, so so this is a picture that I'm going to editorialize. I'm looking at and thinking that the photographer wanted to get some motion in here, but it wanted to pan and get the subject sharp. So, got nervous about what shutter speed and didn't want to go too slow. And I think this picture would have been great as, a half second or a 1 second exposure. Just, I don't think you would lose that you have a rider, a horse, and the American flag on there shot at a very slow speed. The detail of this picture is, is stuff everybody has seen. So the interpretation of bringing the motion into it, I don't think you're going to confuse anyone with things that are this familiar. So I think this picture could have been a pretty successful picture at a much slower shutter speed. As it is, you do see motion in the background. Clearly you've got the horse in a dynamic position with his legs up, the flag. So there's all kinds of things that are in here that get the element of motion. I just think that the potential here was more than what exists. The background, and again, at a slow shutter speed, you would have lost all of the information on the background. And in this context, it's pretty distracting. So, I gave this, I gave this an 8, simply because, you've got the elements of motion. You have good body position. There's a lot of things in here, the hair flying, the tail up. There's a lot of things about it. I just think, there was a lot more potential here, and some compositional elements could have been improved.
On the hunt.
So when I first looked at this picture, I didn't really love it all that much. And then, I took a closer look at it, and you just don't see a lot of bird pictures where their wings are completely collapsed like that. I mean, it's like a projectile that was shot out of a cannon or something. It's just, it's unusual for a bird picture. So, I was drawn back into this. The background is very distracting in this picture. There is, this again, it's quite a bit too fast of a shutter speed to get the sense of motion. It almost looks like it's just thrown out of focus through depth of field here. But the wings being in, just the position, I can't recall seeing a bird picture like this before. It just, I like that. From a toning standpoint, though, this could definitely be improved. The bright area in the lower left under the bird can be taken down. The bark on the tree on the right could be taken down. Could have elevated some saturation in the bird and maybe taken the warm tones down just a little bit to, do things in post that are going to elevate the overall impact of the picture. So compositionally, things could be improved, toning could be improved, but from a standpoint of a unique picture, it's, it kind of got me. So I gave this an 8. I just want to say, some of you may be listening to the scores I'm giving pictures and going, there's no consistency with what he's doing, based on how you look at pictures. And I just want to tell you that, these are my responses. I'm giving credit for things that I find interesting personally, or that I know are difficult, that maybe aren't in every contest judging that you have. So I hope you're allowing me a little bit of leeway in here, but I recognize that some of the scores may be surprising some of you.
Number 5, lead solo, breaking formation.
Okay, perfect case in point, because I gave this the same score as I gave that bird just before. Ridiculous, right? So this is a beautiful picture of this plane, right? I don't understand why there's pink in the picture. Maybe that, you know, is end of the day. The blue and the pink kind of threw me a little bit, but I know it's an airplane. Airplanes fly. These are some of the most amazing airplanes, and you know what they do with these things. And you know, and they've got smoke that comes out of these things. You know, there's just so many more interesting things that these planes do. This is kind of a product shot, a beautiful product shot of a Blue Angel plane, you know, toned nicely. I like a lot of the technical things about it, but from a getting impact from motion out of this picture, I'm not getting it. So it's not that it's not a well done picture. It's just that I'm not moved from a standpoint of motion by this. So I gave it a, you know, a low score within the confines of this contest itself. But it's a nice picture and technically well done. Yeah.
Waterfalls through mossy rocks.
This is a beautiful landscape photo. And it does, you know, it brings in some of the things that I was talking to that woman earlier. You know, you have something near you have a foreground, middle ground, and sort of a background in this picture. But you've got that framing element. You get to enjoy the landscape that this waterfall is in. It's technically executed really nicely. You know, I think it's printed nicely. I might have just vignetted this just a little bit. I really like the texture of the rocks and everything, but I probably would have, especially the top right and left corners, taken those down just a little bit, maybe left the rocks, the lower part of the picture, the way that it is. The top waterfall looks a little bit blown out, and it's possible just that little bit of stream on the top right could have a little more contrast and some texture in there. Just, you know, that we're nitpicking here. I think this is a beautiful photograph, very well executed. I gave this a 10.
Riding in the dusk.
This is a picture that I think is a little bit dark. I lightened this picture up and gave it a little more contrast. The colors really came out, and I think it had a lot more impact. But that aside, you know, this is one of those situations where all the lines in this picture are horizontal for the most part, right? And so, yes, you can see some blurring in here, but I think it's being hurt a little bit by the amount of horizontal lines that are in this when you're panning horizontally. It's an effective pan. I think the shutter speed choice is good. I would go back into Photoshop and just try and maybe lighten it up and selectively darken some of the, you know, maybe darken the road a shade or bring some contrast in there, and you know, lighten and bring some contrast in the background, because you know there's a lot of beauty and impact in the colors that are behind him that can make up for the fact there's a lot of horizontal elements in this picture. But you know, I don't think there's anything particularly special. He's not doing anything special. You have some color in here, and you've got a choice of shutter speed, but I gave it an 8 because I think it's a successful execution of motion. Just, it doesn't really have anything extra beyond that, though.
The sky is moving overhead.
This is a really beautiful picture, and the stars have such a short amount of motion in them. I don't know what that kind of multicolored thing in the middle left of the picture is, but no, I know the Milky Way. There's so much saturation in those colors there, and I don't know what those are. So in any event, I'm not sure. I'd like to ask the photographer, was the intent of this to get the motion of the clouds or the sky? I really like the motion of the clouds in this picture. The short star trails on this just leave me wondering, and I'm not going negative on this, but it leaves me wondering, was that intentional, or it just seems like it would have had more impact with a little bit more time. I don't think you would have lost the motion of the clouds in this, but I would have liked to seen those star trails. I'm not talking about 5-hour star trail here, just a little bit more motion. That said, the setting is terrific. The execution of the foreground and the background together, understanding how to bring those two together, the time of day that this was shot. I don't know if this was shot as a single image or if it's a composite, but as an image itself, I really like it. I do think that a little bit more contrast in the lower right, in the star trails there, just to bring the Milky Way out a little bit more, would elevate this, and maybe just a shade more saturation in the cloud, just from an aesthetic standpoint. But it's a really beautiful picture, and I know a lot of choices went into this, and they all came together really, really nicely. So I gave this a 10.
Well, I got this.
I'm sorry, I do get verbose on these, but I know that each photographer that's got an image, I'm hoping that they appreciate that I'm trying to give you as much of my input as possible on this, and I apologize to everybody else that the whole thing is taking longer than it probably does otherwise. So it looks like the same race that the other picture was taken in, but I think anybody could see this has got a lot more energy in it. You've got that the anticipation and determination in the face there. You've got the lean, legs in a good position there. The choice of both depth of field and shutter speed, you're getting a little bit of motion, more depth of field in the background there, but a lot more energy in this picture. And I kind of like the choice of cropping, if it was cropped. I don't think losing the bicycle wheels on the bottom hurts this picture, because it's much more about the intensity and drive of the cyclist himself, and what's going on here. So I really like this picture. I gave it 9.
Was most of the things you said about the other one proved.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you can see that idea of getting the cyclist in the middle, and you've got cyclists as the background here, and that narrowing the depth of field throws out some of the distraction in the background without losing the context. You can see there's a crowd.
Stalking cheetah.
So this photographer is going to be penalized by the fact that I just came back from Africa and It was in the Masai Mara. So I dismissed this picture pretty early, but the body language on this is very unusual. So, I was drawn to that. The things that I know there are challenges when you're trying to make a picture in these kinds of settings, but there are also, a lot of interesting things that these animals do. I'm not in love with the animal looking straight at the camera with nothing really interesting. I'm not getting any intensity from the face. The tail that is not separating behind him, the way the back left foot, just kind of comes in and then blends in with the lower right foot. I mean, those sorts of things from a compositional standpoint, I don't love it. I gave it an 8, and it's largely just based on the body language in the picture here, the way that he's really got those front legs crossed, and so you do have the sense of movement and looking back the other way. So
This is waiting for the train.
this, again, a pretty simple shot, but I think that the color in this picture helps it a great deal. It'd be fun to play with different crops on this and, crop it to elevate the color that's in the picture. Even, that the lights that are in the very top right of this are kind of an interesting element. So it's, not unlike the motorcycle picture. It's a fairly simple picture. You do get a sense of place from the, anybody who's in Denver knows, right? We've got the Broncos back there. And I think recognizing the contribution of color in this picture, from his glasses and the shirt, I think all of those things were strong choices. And so I like this. I gave this a 9. It's a simple picture, but I think there's a lot of things in this picture that are kind of nice as a simple picture.
This is ripped left leg on a sweeping right turn.
That is a ripped leg. For me, this picture, well, number one, it was too bright when I looked at it, and it improves significantly, particularly taking the lower 40% of this picture down. But I don't love the composition here, the fact that, and again, it seems small, but that the back tire and the ripped legs bike being cropped, that is, that to me is problematic. If you had maybe cropped more from the left so that he was more center of the picture, but he just feels he's kind of far right. It just feels like, it just doesn't feel like it's a particularly well balanced picture cropped properly. I he probably could have come down from the top a little bit, up from the bottom. I think there's a lot of things to improve here. We do have the motion. We were successful in panning, so you have things traveling at different speeds, which you've got, that kind of motion going on. I just think technically and compositionally, this has a number of areas for improvement. So I gave this an 8. I do like the color in the picture. I think that gives it impact.
Every which way.
This picture is, in my mind, this picture is too tight. You don't give the dynamics of what is moving here enough room to move. And to me, the shutter speed is a little bit too fast. And this is where, if it were looser, like you can see at the very top right, you have the explosion of water that you need a certain shutter speed with preserve that. So, you know, there's a number of different ways to interpret this picture from a standpoint of motion, but it's just difficult to have a center of interest in this picture because of how tight it is. You know, I'm drawn to the rock there, but there's not that much going on around the rock, and I think that's in part due to the shutter speed choice. What's happening with the water isn't really dynamic. So I think this was just you know, it was the choice to be this tight or crop a looser picture this tight was you know, is a weakness in this picture. I think it's toned well, maybe a little bit too contrasty, but I do like the texture in the water. I don't think that rock needs to be black. And I wonder if this picture might have been more successful as a black and white, but overall, I think it is too tight. I gave this an 8.
Deep dive.
Now, this is a picture everybody wants to see in their life, you know, whether or not you get a picture of it. It's I'm very jealous. You know, a great picture to have from a standpoint of motion, right? The motion is the implied from the whale going down and all the water pouring off. To me, that's what's most interesting about this picture in this in the setting. I would, you know, I would probably go in and try and get a little more texture out of that water, since it is what's, you know, what's fulfilling the context element of the photograph. But it's printed beautifully. I went in with this picture and took down the blues a little bit, and then added some of the saturation back in, and then did that texturing and contouring with the picture. And I thought it helped it a little bit, but it's a lovely, lovely picture. You know, there's not other than the fact that not everybody gets to see this, people who have seen it have seen similar pictures like this. So it, you do suffer when you have a dramatic picture that people have seen before. You just kind of ask a little bit more from those kind of images. So even though I think this is a beautiful picture and I would love to have this picture myself, I gave it a 9.
This is Rough Takeoff.
Another picture I would love to have. This is just, I mean, that's a sensational picture. It tack sharp, you know, an unusual looking bird, you know, his feet doing different things, his wings all messed up. It's just, I mean, you're just holding your head in your hands, waiting for whatever the disaster is it's about to happen, because that doesn't look good. But I love this picture. I think it's printed well. I don't know what these birds look like. My initial response is that maybe the area around his head and just behind his head need a little more contrast, but that may just be a misunderstanding of what this bird looks like actually. But I just, it's a picture that is arresting, executed really beautifully, you know. For better or worse, you know, the motion is going on for this bird. I just think it's terrific. I love it. I gave it a 10.
Feel the music.
This picture suffered more from technical how it was printed than anything else. You know, it's, you know, her movement is, I'm assuming she's spinning around, just, you know, having everybody from the back here, and, you know, there's nothing really going on in the background other than band's equipment. There's nobody back there. I like the picture. I think it's unusual. You know, from a standpoint of motion, it's her body language that's delivering the motion. I think there may be the slightest amount of blur in there, but it's more her body language. It just, I think it's executed with a little bit too much contrast. And it just didn't have enough for me to give it a 10, but I gave it a 9.
And this is Shake It Off.
I like this picture too. You know, there's just the slightest amount of movement in the feathers there. From the title, I'm assuming he was, you know, he was shaking. I don't really get that sense so much. I think it's a beautiful photograph. Standpoint of motion doesn't really elevate this picture beyond what it would be if there wasn't motion in the picture. So I gave this a 9, but it's a gorgeous picture.
Slipping the Surly Bonds.
So as a picture, this is kind of a mess, but you know, things are not really in focus. You know, what's interesting in the picture is pushed off to the edges, the top and you know, the upper right part of the picture are just, you know, it's just dead space. It's, you know, to me, one of the most interesting things is this fish on the bottom with, you know, the drips of water coming off his tail, is sitting on his side. I love the, you know, the fish that are jumping out of the water, but you know, it's just a lot of, it almost feels like this came straight out of the camera and right, you know, into the computer here. So I don't see anything that was really done in post to try and save things that might have been savable with this picture. The motion and what's happening in the picture are interesting. I enjoy them from the standpoint of just an executed photograph, though. There's a number of weaknesses, so I gave this an 8.
Okay, and we have one final image that is for critique only. This is from a new member. And of course, we allow our current members to also submit stuff for critique only. So, you know, we're looking for the same kind of information from you, Mark. And you can give it a score. It's just that it won't count for anything, but it does give the person an idea of what their image might be. Can we go to that next image, please?
Yeah, you know, again, you've got all of the sparks coming out the front of this gun here, but it's, you know, everything gets frozen by the choice of shutter speed. So I think you know, you're missing an opportunity to get drama from motion because of that particular choice in this photograph. I like the, you know, the smoke that's going on in the picture, but you know, there's many other choices that are happening here. You can't see the face, his dark hat against the dark background back there. It's all blending together. So I just I think this picture misses on more things than it scores on, and doesn't really satisfy motion to my eye. So I gave this a 7.
All right, well, thanks for your commentary about that. The one thing I will note is that Ken said that he shot it with a single shot. This was not continuous. This was just one shot, and he just happened to time it just right.
Yep. If this was a timing contest, we would have had a higher score.
There you go. There you go. All right, we've got a group of 9s and 10s to look at and talk to the makers.
You know, I recognize that there are beautiful pictures that got low scores, and there are some flawed pictures that got higher scores. And, you know, coming from a journalism background, I respond to things that are novel, that are just inherently interesting to me, like that fish picture. I think that picture fails on all kinds of levels. but, the jumping and just the way that they were, it was interesting to me. And, so, I just want to put that out there as for those of you who are finding a disconnect in some of the things that I'm saying, the way that you feel about photographs, that's what I can offer in terms of an explanation.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
Forget about it.
We're not talking about the target. Okay.
All right. Well, that sounds good. That's a good idea. So this is Waterfalls Through Mossy Rocks from Danny Lamb.
The picture was taken at Bridal Veil Falls at historic Columbia Highway near Portland. It was close to the sunset time, so the light is nice and soft. But you're right, there's more light from the top. And thanks for your comments.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Danny.
Good spot.
The Sky is Moving Overhead is from Terry Hanford.
Yeah, this was Shiprock, Arizona. And this shot, I hate to say it was not what I intended to do. I actually took this shot 2.5 minutes to get the foreground, and I was going to composite a picture of sharp stars in the Milky Way before these clouds rolled in. But when I looked at this, at the movement of the clouds, I just decided that cloud movement was a better sky than the sharp stars would have been. So yes, I had the star trails probably would have been better longer, but this was really what intrigued me was the movement of the clouds. And as for the center of the Milky Way, I wish I knew what was going on there. I hope it's not just my lens having a smudge on it, but I actually took the saturation down a bit on that. I don't know if it's gassy clouds, deep space, or a smudge on my lens, but it's cool nonetheless.
I bet that's a nice print if you ever print it.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you for the explanation, Terry. I Got This is from Bill Williams.
Yes, it is the same race, and as you were explaining the first one, I went, okay, I think maybe I got it better in the second one. But yeah, I did notice those things and whatnot, and I'll pay that attention when I come back and do it next year. Thanks.
And you shot it vertically.
Yeah, I did virtually it that way.
A lot of people forget their cameras turn. I know I do.
Waiting for the Train, this is Dave Hull.
This is another shot that I took last week. This is at the RTD station at the University of Denver. And it was my intention when I went there to have a stationary person with a train moving in the background. And I just got lucky because this guy came up dressed in the shirt, and I asked him if I could just take a couple of photographs if he would just remain stationary. And then I got lucky again with one of these trains that has a lot of colors on it. And this was, I think, an 1/8 of a second exposure because the train was moving so slowly. So, and kind of dodged and burned some things, that's that. So thank you, Mark.
Yep. And the Broncos won.
And the Broncos won, so it's all nice. Or do
that again next week?
I will. Not only that's all our task.
Yeah.
Well, that was a nice bit of serendipity to have all those things come together for you.
Yeah, it was.
All right, Deep Dive is from Oz Feniger.
And I took this in Antarctica early this year.
Nobody cares.
I had one version where I didn't have any ice in the background, and I thought then it's just a whale going into a dive. So I decided to leave in some ice and give it some context.
Good call.
So that's about it.
Yeah, the ice was important.
Yeah.
What's the approximate focal length?
Probably
You on
about
a ship or in a,
we were in a Zodiac, and I was using a 70 to 300. So this is probably in a crop sensor, so it's equivalent to about a 450 millimeter lens.
What's above that wall? Is that just a sheer wall going up?
Or is it an iceberg?
Yeah, it's just a sheer wall of ice on the land.
Yeah, you don't have a chance to make a whole ton of images in a situation like this. It would have been interesting to maybe see more of that wall, give that texture, and the drums from the two of those may have elevated the whole picture a little bit more. But it's a really nice photograph.
And I thought, I think the balance would be not very good if there was more cliff of ice.
Well, there's nothing else, the thing in this picture that will always bring the attention is that tail. And even if it were a little bit smaller, I'm not talking tiny, but even if it were 20 to 30% smaller, I don't think it would have lost the impact if the overall context of the photograph added drama to the picture. Something that, just something when you're shooting, to get yourself to do something that you're not immediately drawn to it, photographs things differently than you might commonly do it. You may discover that something doesn't work, or you are being taken down a new path of creativity.
I have another picture where the whale is diving, not quite this angle, and it's dark, but the background is more, you have mountains in the background.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what you're thinking,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Yeah.
sounds like you're going back, Oz.
I was just going to say the same thing. That's a good reason to go back, Oz.
You gotta,
Yeah.
you gotta slope along, you dive under with the whale.
Yeah, we're in the Zodiac and the whale didn't come up and get us. Anyway, that's it, and thanks for your comments.
This is Rough Takeoff from Brian Donovan.
Yeah, I took this summer in southern Iceland, and these puffins aren't very graceful to start out with, but it was pretty windy, and this guy was definitely struggling, but he managed the takeoff.
Such a great shot.
Foot just in the right place.
Yeah, I love this image too. This is really great. It's like Mark said, you're kind of wondering, how did this end up and what the next couple of frames might have been. Feel the Music is from Steve Wilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I agree with your comments about the technical problems in this shot. But what drew me to it was the contrasting juxtaposition between the totally free child and the reserved adults.
This kind of like a Lee Friedlander kind of photograph, and I really like the picture, so I don't want you to think I didn't like it.
It's his granddaughter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And our last one, Shake It Off, is from Jenna Dockweiler.
Yeah, this is a roseate spoonbill in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I was just sitting watching him for a while, and then he shook off while keeping his head completely still. So that's why the head is still really sharp, and then the rest of the feathers are kind of blurry. So I don't know, I just liked the contrast, I guess, between those two. But thank you for your comments.
Yeah, this is a picture that I took into Photoshop and really pumped up the contrast in the water, because there's just, there's a great light and dark thing going on behind it. And I thought that really even added more to what's already a beautiful picture.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jenna, for that explanation. Well, there we go. That is it for this evening. You guys want to walk over to the light switch and get out of the dark? There we go. So I want to thank everyone who submitted images. I hope that everybody here got some some wisdom about the images and learn something about, maybe sitting and shooting different angles, different variations when you're out shooting and that kind of thing. Mark, you have any closing comments for everybody?
We got a side conversation going on that cooking.
Oh, I see. Okay, I see everybody wandering around and like they're leaving, so I guess we're going to end this meeting now. If there are no questions, comments, or anything else left, then we'll go ahead and say sayonara.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.